This message is brought to you by Alliance Bible Church located in Mequon, Wisconsin. Our vision is to captivate generations with the satisfying gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information about Alliance Bible Church or other resources, please check out our website, myabc.church.
Before we jump into this series, I want us to reaffirm to each other what this book is, what it is, and what it does. I want us to reaffirm to each other what this book is and what it does by reading out loud together 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17. Let's read this out loud together. All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. Does that include the book of Daniel? Yes, it includes the book of Daniel. Some questions for you. The New Testament was written in what century? First century. Second question, did either the city or the nation of Babylon exist in the first century? No. Third question, if it didn't exist in the first century, why is it the first century writers of Peter and John refer to it and not in a historical sense? You understand my question? Both Peter and John, the apostles, refer to Babylon and not as referring back to some history. They mention it, they use it as if it's still around. It still exists. Why do Peter and John do that? Why do they do that? The answer is because by the first century, the term Babylon became a symbolic moniker for Rome. Became a symbolic moniker for Rome. Okay. So clearly the New Testament writers and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, scriptures that are breathed out by God, God is directing them in their thinking to say, now you remember the history of Babylon, you're Jewish people, you know it well. I'm inspiring you to use the word Babylon as you talk about Rome. What is it about those two that they have in common that this kind of covers them both? Babylon, Rome became what? It was anti-Christian. It was anti-church. Babylon became this composite picture of many nations. So if what characterizes Babylon is things like corruption and idolatry and immorality and worldliness, then God is saying to Peter and John as they write, that's the term I want you to give to other nations as you see that unfold. And in your case, Peter and John, first century, living in the Roman Empire, it's Rome. Now, from biblical times, we can take the symbolic moniker of Babylon, characterized by corruption, idolatry, immorality, worldliness, and we could expand it beyond that, could we not? Nations like what? You could put Nineveh. You want to put Nineveh in there? You want to put Sodom in there? Gomorrah in there? Tyre, Sidon, you can put those in there as well. It's a symbolic moniker. Under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, God is directing Peter, John, I want you to use the word Babylon. Describe Rome. It's symbolic. It represents immorality, corruption, idolatry, worldliness. Worldliness. So if that is what characterizes Babylon, and we could attach that label to other biblical nations, could we attach that label to other nations today? Yes, we can. And so we can say that Babylon is in Canada. Although, Paul showed the hockey video. You know what happened last night, right? I'm a Minnesota boy, so hockey's kind of, it's there. U.S. beat Canada. Nobody cares. Okay. All right. Babylon is in Canada. Where else is it? China, Malawi, Indonesia, and yes, the United States. The United States. It's in the United States. Babylon is in the United States. The symbolic moniker Babylon could be used talk about the United States. What characterizes Babylon is worldliness. Isaiah gives a great definition of worldliness. Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Great definition of worldliness. David Wells summed that up when he said, worldliness is whatever makes wickedness look normal and righteousness look strange. Worldliness is whatever makes wickedness look normal and righteousness look strange. Now, I have a question for you, drawing on your vast life experience. It's not a comment on your age. Your vast life experience. Have you seen that? Have you seen instances where wickedness is made to look normal and righteousness is made to look strange? Have you seen that? Most of us probably don't have to think too long or too hard to locate that, right? Jesus, in his teaching, has a whole list of wickednesses that he talks about. Sometimes the New Testament has vice lists. Vice lists. Was it the 80s? Miami Vice? Okay, Vice. I've never seen the show. It's not an endorsement of the show. Vice lists. So Jesus has vice lists. He lists off wickednesses. What's on his list of wickednesses? Sexual immorality. It tees up first in a number of New Testament vice lists. It's the first one listed. Have you seen anywhere in your life experience where sexual immorality is made to look normal and sexual holiness is made to look strange? You ever seen that? Jesus has a pretty exhaustive list. He includes in there also theft, greed, envy. I don't know if you know it or not, but you live in a culture that encourages envy. I don't know if you know that or not. I'll just tell you. You live in a culture that encourages envy. Slander. Twin sibling of slander is what? Gossip. The twin sibling of slander is gossip. Two sides of the same coin very often. Arrogance. That's Jesus' list of wickednesses. How often do you see those things made to look normal and whatever the anti that is, strange? There's no shortage of that in America. There's no shortage of that in America. Now, this isn't true on a national level alone. Think about your smaller social circles. You might attend a school where the predominant values of the students and the teachers is to see wickedness as normal and righteousness as strange. I know this is true because I've talked to a number of you about a lot of you, a good number of you live in work environments that's characterized by worldliness. Work environments where wickedness is made to look normal and righteousness is made to look strange. I know that is true. Some of you may have come out of families where that's the case, where wickedness was made to look normal and righteousness was made to look strange. As Christians, we live as exiles in our various Babylons. Okay. As Christians, we live as exiles in our various Babylons. And it's here where the book of Daniel speaks. In one sentence, here's what the book's about. The book of Daniel is a manual on wise living in Babylon. That's what the whole book's about. It is a manual on wise living as an exile in Babylon. How do we live wisely in Babylon? Now, this is a book, as we will see, that combines riveting stories, some fantastic stories, and some really bizarre, perplexing visions. I have some colleagues in ministry who will preach Daniel 1-6 and then quit. Because in chapter 7 come the visions. Are we going to do that here? Come on. Of course not. If the book ended after chapter 6, we'd be done. It's got more. We keep going all the way to the end. And some of this, by the way, is preparatory for the fall because I am going back through the apocalypse starting in the fall. And you need to understand the book of Daniel if you're going to have a better grasp of the book of Revelation. So I've announced that publicly. I'm committed to it. So it'll go in the calendar this week. Book of Daniel deals with God's people enduring exile in Babylon. Now, two approaches. I don't know how you're going to keep this in mind, but there's two applications for us as we work through the book. Okay, two applications to keep in mind, and I'm going to try to keep this orderly for you as we go through it. I've got the first three parts written. This thing's challenging. So, one way the application of this book is going to come to light is in how we see history. So you history buffs are going to eat this up. How we see history, how we interpret history theologically, doctrinally. Okay? You got, the video up there. You got national conflicts, and you've got this imperial domination, and you've got persecution, right? This massive movements within history. The book of Daniel is going to put a theological, doctrinal lens on all of that to help you see it just a little bit differently. That's going to be one application to the book. The other, though, is I recognize you live in the United States in 2025. And I recognize that currently we don't have tanks driving through Main Street in Cedarburg. We've not been invaded as Judah was by a foreign entity. I realize that. And so they can feel distant. However, keeping in mind how under the inspiration of the Spirit, Peter and John used the moniker Babylon as being characterized by worldliness. Anything that makes wickedness look normal and righteousness look strange, you live in Babylons. You live in Babylons. We see Babylon, yes, within the currents of culture, United States culture, we see that. But I also know that you may go to school in one. You may work in one. The people you hang out with may at times make it feel like you're actually in Babylon. Okay? Daniel is a manual on how to live wisely in Babylon. So I want to get into this. I'm going to read chapter 1. And if you don't have it open, get it open. Daniel 1. One other thing here, and I didn't tell the first service this, and I should have. There's a disclaimer that comes with this series. These are deep waters. These are deep waters. And it's here where I feel as a preacher, there's no shortage of first-rate entertainment you're bombarded with day in and day out. And to a great degree, that has a formative effect on us. That forms us. That shapes us. That creates our expectations for life. This series is not going to be entertaining. I have no intention of entertaining you at all. This is the deep end of the pool, and I realize this may be very hard for some of you. I'm asking you to do a couple things. Come prayerfully prepared, okay, to think deeply and to stay with me. And number 2, make sure you've had your coffee before you come to this service. And we've got cup holders in the chairs. You might need to have an extra dose halfway through to keep you alive and awake and moving. Nobody likes to talk about COVID. Remember COVID? Remember grocery shopping? When it first happened? So what couldn't you find grocery shopping? But and in some places you can't find meat or potatoes. You couldn't find meat or potatoes in some places. You remember this? No? You've wiped it from your memory. You couldn't find meat or potatoes in some grocery stores when the first onset happened. There was panic, right? Panic. What could you find? Candy. There was all kinds of Starbursts and Skittles and M&Ms. You go down the candy aisle, it was full. Why is that? Because in a crisis, nobody wants something that's light and fluffy. In a crisis, people want something that's substantive and heavy and nourishing. Okay? The book of Daniel, the occasion for it is crisis. The occasion for the book of Daniel is crisis. It is not Skittles, therefore. It is meat and potatoes. You with me? Okay, we'll see. Daniel 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Check this out. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Ladies, the dream man does exist. I mean, these guys got it all checked off. Kind of jealous, actually. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. Now relax, this is not a series on the Daniel diet. It's not the purpose of this. I kind of be ticked off if I was one of them too, Daniel and his friends, because watch what happens next. So the guard took away their choice food. So here they are eating brisket and ribs and steak. Oh, steak. And Daniel and his friends say, "We're going vegetables," and they're tested with it. They come out looking better than the other guys, and suddenly the brisket's taken off the table. Daniel is what we call a curve wrecker. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. We'll look at 4 things today: exile in Babylon, how we get there, what we maintain there, who we bless there, and the promise we cling to while there. There's your outline. Here's where we're going. 30,000-foot view. Here's the map. Type in your destination on Google Maps. I like to see the beginning and end, get a big picture for where this is going, and then we can zoom in and you can take me street by street. Exile in Babylon, how we get there, what we maintain there, who we bless there, the promise we cling to there. First, how we get there. The book of Daniel opens with 2 succinct statements about Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem. The first statement describes this event in terms of secular history. The second statement describes this event in terms of biblical theology. They're in verses 1 and 2. Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem and besieged it. There's the statement with regard to secular history. Verse 2, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim into his hand. There's the event described in terms of biblical theology. Okay, so look up here for a minute. There are two ways to look at how Daniel and his friends end up in Babylonian exile, and both are true. Very difficult to hold this together. Very difficult to hold this together. Both are true. Okay, the first way is to see them on the receiving end of the successful military campaign of an imposing foreign leader. Okay, this way of seeing the events surrounding Babylon's capture of Jerusalem is how history books are written. It just describes what you and I, with our human eyes, observe. This is what happened. Okay, they simply record what happened. Nebuchadnezzar came, he besieged and then overpowered Judah. He then sends the best of the best in Judah back to Babylon for re-education, confiscates articles from the temple in Jerusalem to be placed in the temple of his God. Why did he do that? That's a way of saying, my God is better than your God. Na, boo-boo. You want to lose sight of what Nebuchadnezzar's attitude towards the Lord is on this. So that's one way to explain how Daniel and his friends end up as exiles. It's the way secular history would talk about it. Now, let's bring it to 2025. This is one way to explain how you become an exile in your Babylon. You're exiled as a student. Why? Well, you're there. Why? Because your parents chose you to send you to that school. They sent you to that school because they chose to live where they live. They chose to live where they live because the job was what it is. I mean, how long do you want this chain to go? There are a whole host of factors that led you to being in the school you're in. On a human level, there are powerful forces that exert influence over our circumstances. That is absolutely 100% true. If you're an exile at work, looked at sideways because you believe and behave differently than your colleagues, why are you there? From a secular history perspective, why are you there? Well, you're there, same kind of thing. You're there because you have, the education you have. You're there because that's the employer that came knocking at your door, making you an offer you couldn't refuse. You're at that place of work because you're from where you're from. On a human level, there are a whole host of powerful forces that exert influence over our circumstances. This is one way to explain your exile, whatever your Babylon is. Think about why it is you're an American and not a Peruvian. Can you explain that? Secular history. Can you explain that? I mean, the links in that chain are rather extensive, don't you think? Rather extensive. And it's true. This is how history would record the event on a human level. There's a second way to view Daniel's exile. Parallel to the description of the siege of Jerusalem and its sad aftermath, we find this statement, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. Though Nebuchadnezzar's might was considerable, he is clearly not the sole reason Jerusalem fell under his influence. His success was not entirely his own doing. It was the result of the will and action of God himself. So what you have is the book of Daniel ripping the curtain back and revealing the theological reality, the spiritual reality behind the historical events. There's always divine influence exerting itself underneath, behind, above human action. Always, always, always. Now, to be clear, God handing his people and his city, let's not lose sight of that. It's his people and his city, him handing them over to Babylon was not arbitrary, nor was it capricious. Leviticus 18, God had told his people they're going to be entering this bountiful land. Way back in Israel's history, way back. They're going to be entering this promised land that God has provided, and the life that they will have there, all of that is going to come by grace. He asked them in the book of Deuteronomy, why do I love you such that I'm willing to do all this for you? What was the answer? Basically, God says, I love you because I've set my affection on you. I love you because I love you. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's not conditioned. It's not conditioned on anything. I love you because I have chosen to love you. That's why. You're getting all this by grace. However, God says, you're going to be in covenant faithfulness to me. Here's the covenant. Here's how you're to walk. And how did they do? Class? Not well. And so does God immediately, all right, that's it. First mistake, you're done. That's it. Forget about it. No. How long does he endure? My word. Talk about the patience of the Lord. You want to know what, the prophets, there's a lot of prophets in the Old Testament. You know what they're there for? To fix these problems. The Lord sends Israel, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, Judah, prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet. What's he doing? Why? He's calling the people back to covenant faithfulness. You've wandered. You're not in line. Come back. Come back. Come back. Come back. Until God says, enough. Bring in the Assyrians for the northern kingdom. Bring in the Babylonians for the southern kingdom. God giving his people and his city into the hands of Babylon was not arbitrary, nor was it capricious. Okay. The circumstances surrounding that is not something Daniel's oblivious to, as we'll find out when we get to chapter 9. He's well aware of the history. Well aware. All right, let me give you the so what. So what? All right. Could you imagine being a resident of Jerusalem? Like common resident of Jerusalem. And you see this imposing foreign military has surrounded you. Man, that would be terrifying, intimidating, difficult, maybe out of control. I mean, what are you going to do against that? Our fate sometimes seems to lie in the hands of hostile people or in the outworking of impersonal forces of one kind or another. Yet the reality is that our every experience in this world, from the apparently coincidental on one end of the spectrum to the determined acts of wicked men and women on the other, all of it lies under the control of a sovereign God. Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem and besieged it, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim into his hand. Simultaneously, both are true. Simultaneously, both are true. This is how we get there. Second, what we maintain there. So we got Daniel, we got Hananiah, we got Mishael, we got Azariah. They're chosen for deportation because they are studs and bright and intelligent. Man, I can't wait to meet them. What were you really like? How did you get that way? They're chosen for deportation. They head back to Babylon, and first thing that happens is their names are changed. From Jewish names to Babylonian names. Picture, you want to contextualize that, picture a Jesus follower by the name of Christian having his name changed to Muhammad. They were also immersed in the language and literature of the Babylonians. Do you think the Jewish people might find that just a tad bit objectionable? I think so. This regimen that they faced probably felt overwhelming. They were awash in an onslaught of Babylonian assimilation, which may be why Daniel chose to draw a line in the sand. Now, here's the question. Why does he draw it with food? They've already had their names changed from Jewish names to Babylonian names. They're now spending their days not meditating on the Torah, but they're trying to master the sacred texts of Babylonian religion. No verse says that they protested any of that. So why draw the line with food? What's wrong with it? The term defile comes up. You might think Jewish dietary laws talked about in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. He wants to keep kosher, but if that's the case, why does he abstain from wine? Old Testament law didn't forbid abstention from wine. Additionally, you got Ezekiel, Hosea, Amos. They're all prophesying before this happened that it would be impossible to keep kosher in exile. Maybe he's avoiding food sacrificed to idols, and that's possible, but Babylon was not a monotheistic religion. It was polytheistic. They had a God that governed every sector of life. It's likely that all their food had been sacrificed at some point to an idol, because you needed to placate that particular God who superintended over the wheat field and the corn field and the soybean field. It's likely all the food there had been compromised in that way. And so if that's not driving, what else is driving it? Some label and take, and I think this is right, the defensive view. What is that? Well, in verse 5, we're told the king assigned Daniel and his friends food and wine from his table. Think about what that'd be like. Babylon is the empire on the block. Right? This is incredibly affluent. By the way, did you know about Babylon's hanging gardens? It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Oh, impressive. Impressive. This is not a poor, struggling empire. This empire is got it all. They've got it all. So the king wants to assign the newly arrived Jews, these handsome, intelligent men, food from his table. What's the food from his table going to be like? Oh, man, this is not any of your mass-produced college food. Not at all. There is no rushing out to McDonald's between classes to grab a quick lunch here. That's not it. No, instead, what do they have? They've got linen tablecloths, silver cutlery. Oh, yeah. And what they're told when the food comes is, guess what? Daniel and the rest of you, what you're eating, the king ate today. What you're eating, the king ate today. You can be sure this was the best food at the equivalent of the best restaurant in town. All of it was part of the king's strategy. Nebuchadnezzar is brilliantly deviant. I would love to go on about this. All right, he wants them trained and then put into service for the advancement of Babylonian causes, right? This is not about punitive, let's punish these Jews. No, this is about how can we use them to advance our purposes. How is he doing that? Not by coercion, but by pampering them. If I can get them to taste the high life, that this is the place to be, they will be so useful to us. This is assimilation, not through punishment. This is assimilation through let's give them the best life possible. Because once they get a taste for that, they won't want anything else. Let's give them affluence. Let's give them everything they could imagine. Before long, they will have forgotten who they are. That sound like anything to you? Every mealtime for Daniel and his friends was a message to the students, to these men. Taste the fruits of what success can offer you. Get used to it. Enjoy it. Go for it. This is the fast track. Pour yourself into it. But Daniel decided he would not eat from the king's table. Man, he's bright. He knew if he embraced everything that was put before him, it wouldn't be long before his soul would be consumed by the opportunities that were around him. He knew that if he didn't exercise some restraint, the pressure of the culture would suck him in and the king's tactic would be successful. I think he sniffed it out. He was utterly realistic about the continual erosive effect of throwing yourself into the embracing of everything this world offers. And he reckoned that he needed a strategy to voluntarily exercise some restraint so that every day there was a reminder before him that he was not of this world, but he belonged to God alone. And so Daniel determined not to eat at the best restaurant in town, but instead ate a brown bag lunch of vegetables. There is tremendous wisdom. He's a bright boy with penetration in his thinking. Some of us go through life and the only question we ask is it right or is it wrong? If there's nothing wrong with it, then go for it. But Daniel exemplifies a kind of nuanced thinking that says it may not be wrong, but is it best? If I do this over time, will I become a compromised believer? This is full of practical significance for us. What movies should you watch? What parties should you go to or not go to? What company should you keep? On what should you spend your money? How big a mortgage should you take? What opportunities should you say yes to? What opportunities should you say no to? We tend to be too black and white, and what we miss is that over a period of time, there is an eroding effect, an eroding power of the secularizing pressure of this world. Daniel perceived that he needed to find some way to exercise some restraint, to remind himself that he was a citizen of another kingdom destined for another world. So the question we ought to ask ourselves is a simple one. How am I maintaining my distinctiveness as a Christian in Babylon? How am I maintaining my distinctiveness as a Christian in the gray areas of life? Maybe it does have to do with the movies you watch, the parties you go to, the company you keep, the things you spend your money on, the size of the mortgage, the opportunities you say yes and no to. I'll tell you one way that as I look back on my life, my parents did this. And we didn't understand it totally as kids, but I get what they were doing. That they're going to draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to be different from our culture in this area. And that was with our commitment to the Sunday morning gathering of the saints and its relationship to extracurriculars. Youth sports, all that stuff. It's even worse now in terms of the opportunities. But we had them when I was a kid too. I played soccer. Why I was playing soccer, I don't know why I was playing soccer. I played soccer, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Games Sunday morning into the afternoon, Saturdays too. Sometimes practices. When my parents signed me up for that, they talked to the coach and said, now look, he will be at everything except that stuff that's happening in the morning on Sundays. He will not be at those games. He'll not be at those practices. We draw a line in the sand. Is that okay with you? If it's not okay with you, let us know. Okay, if it's okay, then he'll be there. All the Saturday stuff, the Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening stuff, he'll be there. And they did that with all four of us. It was their line in the sand to say, look, Babylon is encroaching on everything, and it's not going to go past here. There has to be a way we maintain our distinctiveness in Babylon. And so this is one way they did it. This is one way they did it. You look at verse 9. It says, God caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. So this was in his decision to maintain his distinctiveness. I'm not eating this food. What did God do? He blessed that. He blessed that. He blessed that. Where do you need to draw a line in the sand and say, no, Babylon can't come any further than this. Babylon cannot encroach on us anymore. Not this. Where can you draw a line in the sand and say, no, it's not going any further than this? I can tell you that desire is a desire God wants to bless with the favor of those who are in Babylon. Test the Lord with it. See what he does. See what he does with it. You don't think that was an enormous risk that Daniel took? Oh my goodness. Not playing soccer on Sunday morning, that's nothing compared to this. And the Lord blessed it. Where do you, your family, where do you need to maintain your Christian distinctiveness in Babylon? Say, Babylon, you're not coming any further than this. That is a desire the Lord can and will bless. Third, who we bless there. Who we bless in Babylon. Verse 17, listen to it. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. Now remember what it is they're studying. Given what they're having to study, isn't it remarkable that God is the one who enables them to do it well? This is astonishing, and this is going to mess with you. This is really going to mess with you. God prospers their work at the end of the prescribed re-education. They meet with the king for their oral examination interview, and he finds that these 4 men outstrip all the others. And so they enter the king's service. Verse 20, here's the commendation. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Wow. Question for you. Do you think some of the material, maybe most of the material they were called to master, they would have found objectionable? Oh, you better believe it. Oh, you better believe it. So how do you square that? How do you square their diligence in studying Babylonian sacred texts to be employed as an enchanter and astrologer in Nebuchadnezzar's service? How do you square that and their clear competency with it, with their faithfulness to the Lord? How they do both? How'd they do both? I know a number of you well enough that I'm sure there would be a good number of our people in our church, if they were put in that situation, you would have put your foot down and said to Ashpenaz, go shove it, Ashpenaz. I'm not going to read those books. I know you. There's a few you've done that. So how do we square it? I think we need to back up and trace the chronology in order to understand how we can square their diligence and competency with Babylonian sacred stuff and them receiving, it seems, the commendation of God himself as they lived in Babylon. The first is we have to remember the nature of exile. Sometimes life in a fallen world deals us a bad hand, and the only options in front of us aren't ideal options. Okay? This is something we don't have very well as American Christians right now. This is where we've got to go back to even some of the post-exilic literature. Ezra, for example, people of Israel had intermarried. Remember this? They had intermarried with women of foreign religions, which God had said, no, this is the unequally yoked issue. Yes? Right? Ezra's reading the scriptures. They're convicted about it. They realize, oh my goodness, we married non-believers. Now what are we supposed to do? Well, what do? You got 2 options, and neither of them are any good. Stay unequally yoked or divorce. Which one's good? Neither of them are good. We live in a fallen world, people. Why do you assume that when we face a problem, there's always going to be a clean way out? No. Sometimes the only options in front of you are bad ones. Sorry. That's the nature of it. That's life in Babylon. We have to remember the nature of exile. We have to be utterly realistic about life in Babylon. Second, the Lord is showing us that not everything is worth losing your life over. There is a pick and choose your battle wisdom here. The author's overall tenor of Daniel and his friends is approval. God's effectively saying, you have permission, listen to this, you have permission to read books you don't believe and gain skills you don't value in service of a kingdom you're not part of. Permission granted. That's the nature of life in exile. Third, the comments on their skill and the blessing they'll be to their captors come after their determined decision to maintain their Christian distinctiveness. They draw a line in the sand and determine not to cross it. They resisted wholesale assimilation while still blessing with their extraordinary competency their captors. Now, as you listen to that and you work that out in your own life, do you understand why the book of Daniel is within the literary genre of biblical wisdom? This is hard stuff. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate that? It's said that wisdom is godly competency in the gray areas of life. It's knowing the best thing to do when there's no verse telling you what to do. It's knowing the best thing to do when there's no verse telling you what to do. It takes extraordinary wisdom to put this together. May God give it to us. Last, the promise we cling to while there. Verse 21, and Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. This comes out of the blue. This is whiplash. Okay, now let me set the scene. What's happened before verse 21? Well, we've got Daniel and his friends in the court. They've got their oral examination. Nebuchadnezzar is quizzing them, right? So picture a movie. We're watching this unfold. He's peppering them with questions, and they are responding to every one of them. They're nailing it. He's so impressed with, oh my goodness, these people are better than anything I've ever seen before. And then out of the blue, a red Ferrari comes zipping through the palace court. A red Ferrari comes zipping through, and it's dropped right in the middle. There it is, verse 21. Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. All right, what just happened? Who's Cyrus? Great question. He's the king of Persia. Okay, but I thought we were in Babylon with King Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, we are. All right, so what's up with Cyrus and Persia? Good question. Under the leadership of Cyrus, Persia conquered Babylon in 539 BC. The events of Daniel 1 occur around 600 BC, 60 years earlier. So out of nowhere, the author drops in one verse, boop, that fast forwards us 60 years into the future. And what do we find there? The mighty Babylon of verses 1 to 20 has fallen. Another kingdom has replaced it, but God's servant Daniel continues. I have the song, I'm Still Standing, running through my head from one of the Sing movies. I still have kids, okay? I got kids. This one verse is a sort of parable. Earthly kingdoms rise and fall, but God's people go on. I love how Dale Ralph Davis puts it. He says, so in verse 21, Babylon, the hairy-chested macho brute of the world, has dropped with a thud into the mausoleum of history, while fragile Daniel, servant of the Most High God, is still on his feet. Earthly kingdoms rise and fall, but God's people go on. The story it's a boxing story of Archie Moore is, I think, illustrative of this, bringing some sports here. He was almost 43 years old. He defended his light heavyweight title against the Canadian Yvon Durrell, who was just 30 years old. He's got a 43-year-old fighting a 30-year-old. Durrell, the younger guy, floored Moore 3 times in the first round and once in the 5th. But Moore seemed to gain strength as the fight went on, and Durrell seemed to tire as the fight went on. Finally, in the 11th round, the 43-year-old Moore recorded his 127th knockout. He simply outlasted his younger opponent. And that's the little piece of theology Daniel 1 wants you to get a grip on before you proceed through the rest of the book. Remember that the servants of God will simply out-endure the kingdoms of this age. The servants of God are simply going to out-endure the kingdoms of this age. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, well, what about all those believers who've died martyred deaths at the hands of a Babylon? And I tell you, you're thinking too small. What did Jesus say to the believer? Even though Babylon takes your life, yet shall you live. Even though Babylon takes the lives of thousands of believers, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Babylon has no such future, but the church sure does. That's the promise we cling to. The servants of God will simply out-endure the kingdoms of this age. Folks, nations rise and fall. They rise and fall. But the church will last forever. When the final history book is written, the church will still be standing. Let's pray. Sovereign Lord, your hand directs every movement in human history and our individual lives. There is nothing that overtakes us that does not have your good purposes behind them. I pray this would be a comfort to your people as we bear witness to Christ in our respective Babylons. It won't have the last word. You will. And your word says, God, the gates of hell will not prevail against your church. We, your people, will out-endure the nations of the earth. Give us hope through this big picture. We ask for your glory and our good. Amen.